Rolling. How's it going, YouTube? Rishmi speaking. Hope you guys are well. It's been quite a while since I've been here for story reading and whatnot. Sorry, I had a lot of things on my plate. Things got busy. However, I'm back and I'm here to read yet another story. Super scary stories for sleepovers. Written by Q.L. Pierce, illustrated by Dwight Bean. And for some reason I still keep forgetting. Sorry. Anyhow, we're on our second story. It's called It Waits. The photo on the front page of the local paper was dark and grainy, but the headline above it was very clear. Silver Bay Monster Caught on Film. Not much of a picture, Greg said to his friends, Valerie and Andre. The monster looks more like a big old log floating in water. Valerie shook her head, and that's probably what it is, she agreed. But the tourists seem to eat it up a lot. Yeah, Andre said. Have you ever seen those stupid t-shirts with I swam in the Silver Bay and a drawing of the monster munching on a swimmer? Greg nodded. He'd seen the t-shirts and the books and even a dumb television show about the monster of Silver Bay. The tale had been passed down for generations and could be tracked into an old Native American legend of the beast that came to feed near the shoreline when the waters were icy cold. Mr. Potter, no relation to Harry Potter by the way, from the boathouse claimed that he actually had seen it at dusk 3 winters ago. It came close up slow and easy, he said. Then it moved a little closer to shore, like it was searching for something. Had long sharp teeth too. I could see the thing shining as it passed. I'll tell you this, Mr. Potter said. I'm glad I was on shore instead of in a boat. Well, I don't think I'd be here today, that's for sure. Old Man Potter was known to tell a tale every now and then, but there was a few who were convinced that he was telling the truth. He described the monster in great detail as a gray-skinned beast about 50 feet long or so, with alligator-like head. His description matched those of other sightings, but no one seemed to be able to get a good clear photograph of the beast. Some said it lived most of the time deep in the bay where the water was always cold, only coming close to the surface in the fall or winter months. Well, thank goodness summer's over and all the tourists are going home, said Valerie, walking away from the newsstand. Not all of them, Greg answered. My cousin Mark and his folks are coming to visit from Arizona in a couple of weeks. I didn't know you had a cousin, Valerie said with interest. How old is he? Is he nice? Mean as can be, Greg said, laughing. And he looks like the Silver Bay Monster. Mark and his parents arrived just as the season set in. The leaves on the trees had turned brilliant shades of yellow, red and orange, and the air was crisp and cool. It didn't take long for Greg and Mark to renew their friendship. You're so lucky to live here, Mark said as he and Greg stood on the porch overlooking the bay. Yeah, Greg agreed. It's pretty, but it kind of gets boring sometimes. I think it would be really cool to live in a big city like Phoenix. You've got everything there. Laughed Mark. We don't have any sea monsters. Neither do we, Greg said with a grin. What do you mean? Questioned Mark. I thought there was supposed to be some kind of monster in Silver Bay, like the Loch Ness thing in Scotland. Greg shook his head. That's just an old story. Mark's voice took on a serious note. But I heard that a few people had vanished on the bay. That's true, Greg said, but the monster thing is just a hype. Fall and winter conditions in the bay can be very dangerous for boaters unless they really know how to handle it. The water is very cold and deep. If someone were to fall and drown, the person's body would probably never be found. But, he added, with all the tourists gone, the bay isn't so crowded now. This really is the best time to go out and have some fun. He looked at the early afternoon sunlight shimmering on the water. Do you want to go and see for ourselves? My buddy Andre has a boat. We could all go out for a sightseeing tour, you know. But I thought you said it could be dangerous, Mark said, hesitating. Are you sure your folks won't mind if we go? It isn't risky if you know what you're doing, and we won't tell our folks. Big mistake, Greg said with a wink. We'll just take a short trip and be back before dinner time. An hour later, Greg, Mark, Andre, and Valerie were cruising along the small boat off the shoreline. "I'll take us around the point," Andre called out above the rumble of the motor. He picked up speed in his speedboat and nosed the boat deeper into the water. Soon they rounded the long tree-covered spit of land, entered a secluded cove, and turned back towards the shoreline, which was a tangle of trees and undergrowth that grew to the very edge of the water. Andre expertly guided them around a bare little islet that peaked just above the surface. Greg pointed to the low, wide hump of sand. "That's Goose Bank," he explained. "At high tide, it's underwater. People who don't know any better get hung up on it sometimes. We have to stay here in the channel here. It's a lot deeper." "What about over there?" Mark asked, pointing to a spot a few hundred yards away. "Is that another bank?" Greg turned to look. "What are you talking about?" Mark shielded his eyes from the sun. "I guess I'm just seeing things," he said sheepishly. "It's gone." "Maybe it was the creature," Andre offered with a grin. "That would be the perfect place for it. Deep water, close to shore. Maybe we better get a look at it. You have the camera, right? Don't you, Mark?" "Stop teasing him," Valerie said with a shudder. "The monster is the last thing I want to run into. Anyhow, it's getting late. We need to go back." "She's right, you know," Greg agreed. "Oh well," Andre said with a mock disappointment. "Maybe next time I won't come out with a bunch of chickens." She started to turn the boat into a wide circle, but suddenly it stopped with a jolt and the motor died. "Oh no," moaned Greg. "You didn't hit the bank, did you?" "No, I didn't hit the bank," Andre said, scowling. "There must be something floating. Maybe it's a log or..." "Look!" Valerie cried out before he could finish. "There is something in the water." The four watched in fear as a dark shadow circled slowly under the boat. Greg leaned away from the ledge of the boat. "No, there's no sharks, Andre. You'd better get that motor started." "Right," Andre said. He yanked firmly on the starter cable. Once, twice, even a third time. On the fourth pull, the motor finally sputtered to life, and as it did, the water a few feet away started to bubble and churn. "Something stirring up in the water," called out Valerie. "Let's get out of here." All at once something broke the surface. "Yike!" Andre screamed as an enormously scaly head rose into the air, causing a wave of cold water to slosh over the edge of the boat, drenching everything and killing the motor consequently. In a panic, Andre stood to get a better grip of the starter, causing the boat to sway violently. Suddenly, he was pitched into the dark green water and the monster instantly submerged. Then everything was dead quiet except for the wavelets slapping against the side of the rocking boat. "We've got to help him!" cried Valerie. But there wasn't a ripple in sight. And the kids were too afraid to jump in. "Andre's gone," Greg said flatly. "The monster really does exist." Mark gazed down wide-eyed into the water. "What are we going to do?" Without answering, Greg slid towards the motor and tried to start it. "The motor's flooded. We're not going anywhere." Valerie looked towards the shore. "All we have to do is wait, and someone will come looking for us, right?" Greg shook his head. "No one saw us take the boat, so no one knows where we are. Which is a good idea to tell someone where you're going. Note." "Well, we can't just sit here," Mark said, trying hard to control his trembling voice. "What if that thing comes back again? We're soaking wet. We'll freeze to death if we stay out here all night." "Mark's right," Greg said. "We're going to have to swim for it. We're going to have to risk. It's only a few hundred yards away." "Are you out of your mind? We're no safer on this boat than swimming. Swimming's the only way we're going to get out of this." "Well, I won't do it," Valerie insisted. "I'd rather freeze here than get in that water with that thing out there." Greg looked at Mark. "We can make it. Are you with me?" Shaking with fright and cold, Mark nodded, and the two boys eased themselves over the edge of the boat. Then, as quietly as they could, they headed toward shore. The water was painfully cold. but Greg willed his body to keep moving and moving, his eyes fixed on the shoreline. They hadn't gotten but a few yards away when they heard Valerie scream. The two boys looked back and saw the water swirling around the tiny boat. Suddenly it tossed into the air. It landed upside down on the surface with a resounding slap, and Valerie tried to clamber on top of it, but the monster pulled her beneath the surface with her legs flailing. "Swim!" Greg shouted to his cousin, but it was too late. The water was already growing deeper and darker beneath them, and in front of them something was between them and the shoreline. "It's out there!" cried Mark. "Wait!" But before he could finish, he disappeared. Greg began to swim with every bit of energy he could muster. His arms churned across the surface until all at once he felt something solid beneath his feet. Crying hard, he dragged himself onto the shore and looked around. "Oh no!" he wailed. He had made it to land all right, but it was to Goosebank. The tide was rising, and soon the bank and Greg would be totally submerged. As the waves lapped closer to his feet, Greg called out for help, but there was no one to hear him. No one but it. I hope you enjoyed the story, and as soon as I can, I will go on to story number 3. Thank you and good night. And always tell your parents where you're going.